A very good morning, students. Today I am going to continue with viral infections. Previously, we saw about the human herpes virus, its classification, and I have covered about herpes simplex virus and its infection. Now I am going to continue with few more subtypes of human herpes virus such as varicella zoster virus and Epstein-Barr virus. Further, I am also going to talk about the paromyxovirus and its types. Varicella zoster virus, that is HHV3, is a DNA type of virus. It is similar to herpes simplex virus in many aspects. It causes two distinct lesions, that is the chickenpox and herpes zoster. The chickenpox represents the primary infection of varicella zoster virus. The recurrence is possible as herpes zoster, which is caused by the reactivation of varicella zoster virus. First, we'll see about varicella, that is chickenpox. Chickenpox is an acute, extremely contagious disease, usually occurring in children, and is characterized by an exanthematous vesicular rash. It is the most common in winter or spring months. The incubation period is approximately 2 weeks. The mode of transmission is by airborne droplets or through the direct contact with the infected lesion, with probable portal entry being the respiratory tract. Now we'll see the clinical features. The disease is characterized by the occurrence of headache, nasopharyngitis and anorexia, followed by the maculopapular or vesicular eruption of the skin and low-grade fever. These eruption usually begins on the trunk and spread to involve the face and extremities. The lesion of the skin eventually rupture, form a superficial crust and heal by desquamation. Occasionally, the secondary infection of the vesicle results in formation of pustule, which may leave a small pitting scar upon healing. Now we'll see about the oral manifestations. Small blister-like lesion involving the oral mucosa, chiefly the buccal mucosa, tongue, gingiva, palate and the pharynx. The mucosal lesion initially slightly raised vesicle with a surrounding erythema and rupture soon after the formation and form a small eroded ulcer with red margin closely resembling the aphthous lesion. These lesions are not particularly painful. Now we'll see the cytological finding. The cytological alteration are virtually identical to those described for herpes simplex virus. The virus causes acantholysis with formation of numerous free-floating Zang cells, which exhibits nuclear margination of chromatin, and occasional multinucleation is also seen. Now we'll see the histopathology of varicella zoster. Histopathologically, there will be an intraepithelial split will be present. So inside that split, there will be more amount of acantholytic cells will be seen. That is the free floating as Zang cells will be present, and these Zang cells have a nuclear margins of chromatin. Sometimes these Zang cells is of a multinucleation also. The underlying connective tissue have a more amount of inflammatory cells will be present. Even surrounding the split, there will be a more amount of inflammatory cells is seen. So the arrow indicates the intraepithelial split. So this picture shows the higher magnification of varicella zoster. The right side black arrow indicates the multinucleation of a Zang cell, whereas the left side arrow you can see the nuclear inclusion with chromatin margination. Now we'll see about herpes zoster. It is caused by reactivation of latent varicella zoster virus, which had been acquired during previous attack of chickenpox. A primary infection by varicella zoster virus results clinically in chickenpox, while a recurrent infection results clinically in herpes zoster. The herpes zoster is an acute infectious viral disease of extremely painful and incapacitating nature, which is characterized by inflammation of dorsal root ganglia or extramedullary cranial nerve ganglia associated with vesicular eruption of the skin or mucous membrane in areas supplied by the affected sensory nerves. Now we'll see the clinical features. The disease is most common in adults and it affects males and females with equal frequency. Initially, the adult patient exhibit fever, general malaise, pain and tenderness along the course of the involved sensory nerves. Often the trunk is affected. Within a few days, the patient has a linear papillar or vesicular eruption of the skin or mucus supplied by the affected nerves. It is typically unilateral and dermatomic in distribution. After the rupture of the vesicle, the healing comes, although secondary infection may intervene and slow the process considerably. Occasionally, herpes zoster may resemble the lesion of herpes simplex, but the two diseases can be separated since the zoster virus cannot transmit to the animals. It is common infection in immunocompromised patients and those with certain malignancies including Hodgkin's disease and malignant lymphoma. Now we'll move on to the oral manifestations. Herpes zoster may involve the face by the infection of trigeminal nerve. This usually consists of unilateral involvement of skin areas supplied by either ophthalmic, maxillary or mandibular nerves. The lesion of the oral mucosa are fairly common and extremely painful vesicle may be found on the buccal mucosa, tongue, uvula, pharynx and larynx. These generally ruptures in leaves the areas of erosion. One of the most characteristic clinical feature of this disease is involving the face and oral cavity unilaterally. When the lesion is large, it will extend up to the midline and stops abruptly. A special form of zoster infection of the geniculate ganglia with the involvement of external ear and the oral mucosa have been termed as James-Ramsay-Hunt syndrome. The clinical manifestation includes facial paralysis as well as pain of the external auditory meatus and pinna of the ear. In addition, the vesicular eruption occurs in the oral cavity and oropharynx with hoarseness, vertigo and occasional other disturbances. Now we'll see the histopathological features. The histopathological features will be similar to that of the varicella. So we have already seen the histopathological features of varicella. So now we'll move on to the diagnosis. The herpes zoster can frequently be recognized by the characteristic distribution of the lesion, although there may be a similarity of the lesion of the herpes simplex infection. Skin lesion and the oral lesion in particular may be easily identified as a viral disease by cytological smear, and the characteristic multinucleated giant cell and intranuclear inclusion body can be seen using a Zang test. However, this does not differentiate between an herpes zoster and an herpes simplex. This can be done by a fluorescent antibody staining technique, viral culture or a serological diagnosis. Now we will see the treatment. The newer antiviral drugs are now under intensive clinical testing for potential effectiveness in treatment of herpes zoster. The preliminary result appears very promising. Now we'll move on to the infectious mononucleosis. The symptomatic disease results from the exposure to the Epstein-Barr virus. The infection usually occurs by intimate contact. Intrafamilial spread is common, and once a person is exposed to Epstein-Barr virus, remain in host for life. Children usually become infected through the contaminated saliva on fingers, toys and other objects. Adults usually contact the virus through the direct salivary transfer such as shared straw or by kissing, hence the nickname Kissing's disease. Now we'll see the clinical features of infectious mononucleosis. Exposure during childhood is usually asymptomatic and most symptomatic infection arises in young adults. Most young adults experiences fever, lymphadenopathy, pharyngitis and tonsillitis. Hepatosplenomegaly and rash are less frequently seen. Petechiae on hard or soft palate are present in about 25% of patients. Petechiae are transient and usually disappear within 24 to 48 hours. Necrotizing ulcerative gingivitis is also fairly common. Histopathologically, infectious mononucleosis have a mixture of cell types, that is, it has an epithelioid type of cells, even it has an plasmacytoid cells also, and these individual cells will have a prominent nucleoli. So these are all the important findings we will see histopathologically. Now we'll see about the diagnosis of infectious mononucleosis. The classic serological finding in infectious mononucleosis is the presence of Paul Bunel heterophilic antibodies, that is immunoglobulin that agglutinate sheep erythrocyte. A rapid test for those antibodies are available and it is inexpensive. Indirect immunofluorescence testing to detect Epstein-Barr virus specific antibody should be used in those suspected of having Epstein-Barr virus infection but whose findings were negative on Paul Bunel test. ELISA and recombinant DNA derived antigens also may be used in the place of indirect immunofluorescence test. Now we'll see the treatment part. In most cases, infectious mononucleosis resolves within 4 to 6 weeks. Non-aspirin containing antipyretics and NSAIDs can be used to minimize the most common symptoms. Move on to the paromyxovirus. Paromyxovirus belongs to the family Paromyxoviridae, which is an RNA type of virus. So I am going to talk about two infections that is caused by paromyxovirus, that is measles and mumps. Measles or rubella is an infection produced by genus Morbillivirus. Mumps or epidermic parotitis is an infection produced by genus Rubella virus. First, we'll see about measles. Measles is an acute contagious dermatotropic viral infection primarily affecting children and occurring many times in epidemic form. The outbreaks are often cyclic in nature and are seen commonly at 2 or 3 years interval. The spread of the disease occurs by the direct contact with an affected person or by droplet infection. The portal entry being the respiratory tract. The incubation period is generally 8 to 12 days. It is mainly transmitted in large families, crowded homes, and slums. It is a self-limiting disease in healthy, immune competent children, but morbidity and mortality is highly in malnourished and immunocompromised individuals. Moving on to its pathogenesis, upon invasion of respiratory epithelium, it reaches reticuloendothelial system through bloodstream and thereby infects skin, respiratory tract and other organs. The invasion of T lymphocytes and increased level of suppressive cytokine leads to transient suppression of cellular immunity. Monocyte is mainly infected. Symptom shows mainly due to the infection of the entire respiratory epithelia and the secondary infection with bacteria. Viremia develops but specific antibodies are not developed before the onset of rash. Cellular immunity play a major role in host defense against measles. Now we'll see the clinical features. It is characterized by the onset of fever, malaise, cough, conjunctivitis, photophobia, lacrimation and eruptive lesion of the skin and oral mucosa. Skin eruption usually begins on the face, in the hairline and behind the ears and spreads to the neck, chest, back and the extremities. These appears as tiny red macules or papule which enlarges and coalesces to form blotchy, discolored, irregular lesion which blanches upon pressure and gradually fade away in 4 to 5 days with a fine desquamation. Now we'll see the oral manifestation. Koplik spot is the most important finding of measles patient. Almost 97% of patient who is affected by measles will have Koplik spot. This characteristic spot usually occurs on buccal mucosa and they are small irregularly shaped flecks which appears as bluish or white specks surrounded by a bright red margin. These macular lesions increased in number rapidly and coalesces to form small patches. Palatal and pharyngeal petechiae as well as generalized inflammation, congestion, swelling and focal ulceration of gingiva, palate and throat may also seen. So this picture shows you the Koplik spot of buccal mucosa, and you can able to see some white specks which is surrounded by a bright red margin. So this is how a Koplik spot will be. Now we'll see the histopathological features. Koplik spot represents the area of focal hyperkeratosis in which the underlying epithelium exhibits spongiosis, intercellular edema, disc keratosis and epithelial giant cells. The number of nuclei within these giant cells ranges from 3 to more than 25 nuclei is present. The pink staining inclusion in the nuclei of the epithelial cell represents the microtubular aggregates, a characteristic of a causative paromyxovirus. You can see an arrow in this picture that shows the multinucleated giant cells. As the spot ages, the epithelium exhibits heavy exocytosis by neutrophils, leading to microabscess formation, epithelial necrosis, and ultimately ulceration is seen. Within hyperplastic lymphoid tissue, there were numerous multinucleated giant lymphocytes is present. These multinucleated cells have been termed as Warthin-Finkelday type of giant cells. This picture is the histopathology of lymph node sinus. You can see an arrows. These arrows pointing the giant cells with numerous tightly packed nuclei. So these type of giant cells is called as Warthin-Finkelday type of giant cells, and it is most commonly present in the lymph nodes. Now we'll see the treatment of measles. Measles vaccines are available as single or in combination, that is MMR. Edmonton Zagrin strain, that is EZ strain, 5 ml of vaccine is given subcutaneously. Age of vaccination is 9 months and second dose should be given in the form of MMR at 15 to 18 months for adequate immunity. Now we'll see about mumps. Mumps is an acute contagious viral infection characterized chiefly by unilateral or bilateral swelling of salivary gland. Usually it involves the parotid salivary gland. Other than salivary gland, it may also involve meninges, pancreas and gonads. Mumps has a incubation period of 2 to 3 weeks. It is transmitted through the respiratory route. Once infected, the patient develops a lifelong immunity against the disease. But there are few cases even the recurrence is also reported. Moving on to its pathogenesis, once transmitted through droplet nuclei or saliva, it starts replicating in the respiratory epithelium. It spreads to local lymph nodes and subsequently develops viremia. The affected area shows perivascular and intestinal mononuclear cell infiltrates with edema. Necrosis of acinar and epithelial duct cells is seen in salivary glands and in the germinal epithelium of seminiferous tubules. We'll see the clinical features. The disease is usually preceded by onset of headache, chills, moderate fever, vomiting and pain below the ear. These symptoms are followed by a firm, somewhat rubbery or elastic swelling of the salivary gland, frequently elevating the ear, which usually lasts for about 1 week. The bilateral parotid involvement occurs in about 70% of cases. The submandibular glands may also involve separately or in conjunction with the parotid gland. The pain upon mastication is a common finding. The involvement of sublingual gland is rare. Moving on to its diagnosis, complement fixation test, ELISA or heme agglutination inhibition are the tests used for the diagnosis of mumps. The serum analysis is elevated in both parotitis and pancreatitis. Moving on to its treatment, a conservative treatment is the treatment of choice. You should maintain the hydration of the particular patient. it is better to prevent by using a vaccine. There were a few doubts asked by your batchmates. First, I'll start off with a doubt from Schaefer's page number 303. So the individual colony may appear round or lobulated, made up of meshwork of filaments that contain with hemotoxin but shows eosinophilia of peripheral club-shaped ends of filaments. So this arrow shows the ends of filaments, so that is eosinophilic in nature, whereas the center area you can see hematoxyphilic. So this is what I have explained in the actinomycosis class, that is centrally there will be an hematoxyphilic area and the peripherally there will be an eosinophilic area that shows you a ray fungus appearance. So this is what they have explained in the Schaefer's book also. Okay, I hope you have understood the meaning for that particular paragraph right now. And you have asked the other doubt, that is what do you mean by the term eosinophilia? So the term eosinophilia here refers the pink color area that stains the peripheral club shaped filaments. So that arrow shows the club shaped filaments, so that is the eosinophilic area, that is the pink color area. This is what they meant the eosinophilia here. The next doubt is, why do RBC appears red in color in hematoxin and eosin stain? See, the eosin, which is an acidic dye and that is a negative charged dye. So it binds with the positively charged component. So RBC is an positively charged component, so which will stain eosin. Due to the presence of hemoglobin content, it will have a more intense staining. So it will not appear pink, it will appear red in HNE. So the RBCs will appear red in hematoxin and eosin stain. The next doubt is about Zang cell. Zang cell is an acantholytic cell, which is large, round keratinocyte with an hypertrophic nucleus and abundant basophilic cytoplasm, which is deeper peripherally on the cell membrane due to cytoplasmic condensation at the periphery, leading to perinuclear halo. Sometimes these Zang cells, it can be often multinucleated giant cells also. This multinucleation is formed due to the fusion of acantholytic keratinocyte. It is most commonly seen in Pemphigus vulgaris, herpes zoster, varicella zoster and herpes simplex. So in this slide you can see a picture. It is a picture of Pemphigus vulgaris that shows you the Zang cells. So this is how a Zang cells will be. To conclude today's class, first we saw about the varicella zoster virus. Its primary lesion is chickenpox and its reactivated or a recurrent lesion is herpes zoster. Its histopathological feature shows a numerous free-floating Zang cell, which is an important finding in both varicella zoster and as well as the herpes zoster. Then we have moved on to the infectious mononucleosis, and this is caused by the Epstein-Barr virus. The diagnosis is made by polyclonal heterophilic antibodies. Then we have moved on to the paramyxovirus. The paramyxovirus has two types, that is measles and mumps. In oral manifestation of measles, we can identify an important finding, that is the Koplik spot. And histopathologically, there is one important type of giant cells that is seen in lymph nodes, that is Warthin-Finkelday giant cells. Mumps involves unilateral or bilateral swelling of the salivary gland. It usually involves the parotid type of salivary gland. MMR vaccine is given to control measles, mumps and rubella. So with this, I am completing my today's class. I hope you have understood all the viral topics which I have taken today. If you have any doubts, you just write it down in the Google form. Thank you. Have a great day.